There are 76 legal additives in American wine. Here's why they're not on any label. Every food you buy in America has to list its ingredients. Every snack, every drink, every condiment. That's the FDA. Wine isn't regulated by the FDA. It's regulated by a different agency, the TTB. The Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau. Focus on the tax. And the TTB does not require disclosure. So winemakers can put up to 76 different additives into your wine, and they never have to tell you about a single one of them. And guess who the biggest culprits are? The ones you're probably already buying. Let's walk through what's probably in most of the bottles on the supermarket shelf. Start with what you see. That deep, dark, consistent red color you expect when you pour a glass of wine? Yeah, that's called mega purple. It's a grape concentrate, technically still from grapes, so it doesn't need to be disclosed. It's made from a grape called ruby red that's been bred specifically for color. It's so concentrated that a tiny amount turns any pale thin wine into a deep inky red. That is estimated to be in over 25 million bottles a year. And because it's derived from grapes, it never has to appear on a label. So when you see that perfect, consistent color from a $15 bottle, that's probably not the vineyard. That's probably the lab. Next, how it tastes. You know that oaky vanilla flavor you associate with a good red wine? The one that you say is bold. A lot of commercial wines get that from oak chips or oak staves, essentially wood shavings or plank soaked in the wine during the fermentation. It gives you the flavor of barrel aging in a fraction of the time and a fraction of the cost. But real barrel aging means putting wine in an actual French or American or Slavonian oak barrel for 12, 14, 18 months. It's slow, it's expensive, and the result is completely different. You get complexity and not just a flavor note. You'll taste this if you've ever had good Chardonnay as opposed to cheap Chardonnay. Oak chips give you a very one-note vanilla hit. Real barrels give you something that evolves in the glass, not to sound too much like a wine nerd. But again, you've probably tasted the difference and didn't know what you were tasting. And then there's added sugars. In a lot of wine regions, winemakers add cane sugar to the grape juice before fermentation. They call it chaptalization. The sugar gets converted to alcohol, so it doesn't always stay sweet, but it changes the structure of the wine. It's basically a shortcut for grapes that weren't ripe enough to stand on their own. Sometimes they do leave the sugar in there. And then there's what happens after fermentation. Fining agents. Don't get me wrong, filtering and fining wine is completely okay and normal. That is how winemakers clarify wine. They make it clear and bright instead of cloudy. But common fining agents include egg whites, casein, which is a milk protein, and isinglass, which is gelatin made from fish swim bladders. None of these have to be on the label. So if you're vegan, or if you have a dairy allergy, or if you have a shellfish allergy, you have absolutely no way of knowing what was used to process your wine. That's one of the reasons kosher wine is a thing. This isn't a fringe concern, it's an actual information issue that doesn't exist for any other food or drink product in this country. And it's totally avoidable. Serious winemakers use bentonite clay or other fining agents that are vegan. So here's what I want you to think about. I'm not telling all of this to scare you. Most of these additives and the doses that they're used are probably completely fine. The science says so, and I'm not going to argue with that. But here's my question. Why is it that most great winemakers are totally okay with pushing the industry to add ingredient lists and mass wineries are not? Answer's pretty obvious. Most good winemakers don't use any of this stuff. They just don't get any credit for it because there's no label to prove it either way. The winemaker who uses mega purple and oak chips and commercial yeast looks exactly the same on the shelf as a winemaker who spent 18 months in a real barrel with organic grapes and wild yeast, and one of them gets called a deal while the other one gets called expensive. Every wine we sell under Bruno is organic. Some of it is biodynamic. There's no added sugar, there's no oak chips, there's no mega purple. There are no fining agents that you can't pronounce. Real barrel aging on all of our wines, sometimes up to 18 months in French oak. That's money tied up. We don't use crap because our winemakers don't need them. When you start with the right grapes from the right soil and you give wine the time it actually needs, you don't need to fix it in a lab afterward. Listen, I can't fix the labeling laws, but I can make wine where the answer to what's in this is a really short conversation. Our Forget Napa Cab is $44, organic from Sonoma County in volcanic soils, and spent 14 months in French oak. If you don't love this, you email me at hey@bruno.wine and I'll refund you with no questions asked. So come check out our organic lineup at bruno.wine. Drink different or die bored.